reports then.
All right, it's 5:45. We'll call the meeting to order. Welcome to our regular board meeting of March 10th, 2025. We'll start with roll call.
Amy Riddle Swanson. Here. Abe Smith.
Here.
Dominique Stewart. Here. Rachel Henderson.
Here.
Dale Lawkey.
Here.
Amber Kirstein.
Here.
Emily Hines.
Here.
Michelle Dupree.
Here.
Angela Wolf. Here.
We have a quorum. Let's stand for the
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And their mission statement: the school district of the Menomonie area, by embracing the unique needs and using the strengths of our diverse community, is dedicated to preparing all students to become lifelong learners, caring individuals, and responsible citizens. Do we have any proposed changes to the agenda order tonight? Seeing none, we have no recommendations and commendations this evening, and we'll move on to our highlight items.
First of all, thank you to Mrs. School for setting up Wakanda Elementary for our meeting. Also, if anybody needs an agenda, they're over there on the table. If anybody needs a place to sit, Mr. Veteran has a spot right next to him. Thank you to our students who are attending tonight. Okay, I'm just going to mention one thing from each school. It's been another great month in the school district. For the high school, I'd like to point out Freaky Friday was the school musical that was on the last 2 weeks. I had a chance to see it. The kids did a great job. Wonderful job with that performance. It was well attended. A lot of parents, a lot of family members, and a lot of community members. So very well done. At the middle school, there's a lot to report on there as well, but I do want to mention the math counts team. They had a big competition in Rice Lake, and the Science Olympiad team just did really well last weekend, winning the Science Olympiad regional. It was a regional tournament, Mr. Becker, wasn't it? It was boys ago. Downsville Elementary School, they had a nice activity where the fifth graders had a visit with their first grade buddies during snack time. We'd love to see the older elementary kids be good role models for the younger elementary kids. At Knapp Elementary School, I'd like to mention the geography fair that the third graders participated in, learn about specific country and culture. Elementary school at Wolflawn, the mystery readers visited third grade classrooms, while the fourth grade investigated light and mirrors. At River Heights Elementary School, the second grade students and staff led their most recent Roadrunner rally to celebrate positive behavior at River Heights Elementary. And at Wakanda Elementary School, fifth grade students enjoyed a special visit from the middle school music department to help them select music options for the upcoming sixth grade year. There's a lot more there. We'll share this out with the community tomorrow. But great job, everyone. It's been another highlight on you.
Joe, just a word about the play. I was really impressed with 6 performances. You talked about being all well attended. That was really very thoughtful of the staff presenting 6 times so that it could fit people's schedules. And Tia was just fantastic. So it's good to see someone that I knew in the play.
All right, speaking of, next up we have our student representative communication. Thanks for being here tonight.
Good evening, members of the school board. Once again, we are grateful for this opportunity to share the recent achievements and events happening within our school. And you might notice I have a different face with me today.
Hi, my name is Steve Wankowitz. I'm a sophomore and I'm the student body treasurer of the council. So 5 teams traveled to the regional junior achievement typing competition at UW Oakland. Olivia Rubenzer and Elena Jean took first place, where they earned a $1,000 scholarship and a trip to state with Eric Erickson and all the located.
Students at MHS recently performed the Disney musical Freaky Friday. Their last show was on Saturday, and they had a great turnout for both evenings of shifts.
Not only did the musical involve many actors on stage, but many students also put a lot of work in behind the scenes. The musical had 5 high school students in the orchestra pit. Jameson Chen was on bass, Soren Andrud on the drums, Levi Freeman on the cello, Phil Bang on the violin, and Tony Fioroni on the flute.
HOSA recently hosted a blood drive at MHS. There was a total of 29 units collected, saving up to 87 lives.
The MHS band has a concert on March 11th at 7 in the high school featuring the jazz ensemble, Gresham Band, as well as the wind team. On March 15th, the band will depart for Fort Lauderdale, and on March 16th, they will be embarking on a 7-night Eastern Caribbean cruise on the Royal Caribbean Symphony of the Seas. They will be performing on the ship as well as at the local school in Saint Martin. Additionally, the band will be participating in excursions at St. Thomas and Coco Ray in the Bahamas.
Several global scholars have completed and continue to complete their service projects benefiting several organizations around the world. If everyone finishes successfully, the program is expecting at least 25 graduating global scholars in 2025.
March 31st and April 1st, 2025 is when the FBLA will travel to their state competition. The FBLA state attendees include Leah Nolly, Ari DeLong, Tristan England, Gonzalo Garcia Escolar, Emmy Damas, Lady Newdorf, Vista Marcinetta, Kennedy Nolan, Elliot Risler, Jackie Velaz, Amelia Weber, Anna Weber, as well as Nolan.
We have recently had many athletes competing at state competitions. The boys wrestling team had 6 state qualifiers this year: Aaron Howard, Aiden Ari, Jake Anderson, Ray Kemmer, Ben Homansky, and Bryce Shepard. Aiden Ari placed 4th at the individual state wrestling tournament. The team also had many first team and second team all-conference athletes. Aiden Ari, Ray Kemmer, Bryce Shepard, and Bailey Casey all earned first team all-conference. Aaron Howard, Jake Anderson, Ben Homansky, and Luke Kemmer earned second team all-conference. Izzy Whitwell also earned a trip to state and competed at the gymnastics state conference last weekend.
Many students were chosen to have their artwork displayed around the community. Make sure to check out their work displayed at the Menomonie Public Library, Culver's, CBTC Menomonie. Artwork will be up through the month of March.
A few members of the student council completed and submitted a presentation for the Wisconsin Association of School Councils. MHS won the WASC Spirit of Excellence Award for Region 1. The school will receive a banner, and the students who completed the project will travel to a bunch of states to get recognized. At the state conference, we will find out if we won at the state level.
The forensics team took first place at their competition at Ballwood this weekend, resulting in a clean sweep of all competitions this season. All students have qualified to move on to districts, and district competition will be conducted later in March. Students who qualify for districts will move on to the state competition.
That's all we have for today. Thank you for having us.
And Taya, Mr. Dalkey sent us a couple pictures of you from so we're not able to pull them up on the screen because this program is pretty finicky. But board members, it's in the highlight on you. There's a couple attachments, a couple pictures of Taya. I thought you weren't supposed to take pictures during those meetings.
I did not take the picture, I got it offline.
Okay. There you go.
Nice job.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thanks for
sharing all that. All right, the next up is community communication. So this will be more happening tonight. All right. All right, then we will move on to revenue and expenditure reports for the month ended February 2025.
All right, yeah, I'd like to start out as usual with the revenue report. A couple things changing here from last month. Fund 10 levy was like $280,000 last time, and that has been bumped up to 3.3, and we expect to get more in the coming months too for the Fund 10 levy. And then the high cost transportation aid, that was 0 last month, and then this month we got our revenue for that of about $100,000 for, again, the high cost transportation aid. I've also been submitting title claims, and hopefully we will start seeing those in the next month or two for those as well. Any questions on the revenue report? expense report. First, I'll start with the expense by object. The biggest change in that report is the debt payments, so the items 600 through 699. Those debt payments are regular payments that are due early March, so we usually pay them in like February, and so those we paid out, and so that is reflected on the new form. And again, that's the most significant change from last month. And then the expense report by function. One of the things I noticed was a jump in gas and electricity. So for this year, I've kept an eye on it. For this year, we've kind of been in line with 2022, 2023 winter or heat expenses. If you recall, the last winter, 23, 24, was very mild. And so we've always, of course, spent more than that winter because it was extremely mild. February, though, had at least 2 weeks where it was very, very cold, and so there was a noticeable jump in utility costs. I'm not optimistic that when, it's 60 degrees out right now, but winter I don't think is maybe entirely behind us, but maybe sub-zero temperatures are, so hopefully we're done with that, and so these will level out again, so. Any questions with any of the expenses?
On the expense by function, can you explain the other non-program transactions line and what's going on there?
And there wasn't much budgeted in there, and then the actual was a little bit over, so it looks, worse than it is.
Okay.
Maybe for next time I'll see what that 8,000 is and be able to dig into that.
Okay, sure. Yeah, sorry, that was me.
Okay.
Other questions on the revenue and expense report? Thank you. Great. Next up, we have our monthly employment report. This is information only does anyone have questions or discussion on the monthly employment report? Sorry.
It looks like there's been some turnover in staffing at the middle school. Are those positions filled now, or what's the gaps?
As of tonight, yep. Yes, yeah. We were able to do a quick turnaround after a resignation, so we're good.
Thanks.
Any other questions on the monthly employment report? Okay. And moving on to the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move.
Second. Motion by Emily, second by Dominique. Tonight we have minutes from our regular board meeting of February 10th and our special board meeting of February 24th. We have general fund checks in the amount of $2,439,708.75 and cash receipts in the amount of $263,745.50. We have several donations exceeding $1,000 for the month of February, including $6,754 from the Community Foundation of Kent County for more teacher mini grants, $2,184.16 made on behalf of the Betty Geshe Fund for Menomonie Athletics. Also comes via the Community Foundation. A $2,000 grant from the Sunrise Rotary to the Menomonie Middle School Science Olympiad program, and $2,200 in donations from various community members for the School Nutrition Angel Fund. Additionally, on the consent agenda, we have our CISA 10 shared services contract that we discussed at our last meeting, the CISA 11 shared services contract as discussed at the last meeting, and the donation agreement for National Grid Renewables. Any questions or discussion on the consent agenda? All right, seeing none, let's vote. And motion passes unanimously. Next up, we have the personnel consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the personnel consent agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Amy, second by Angie. Tonight we have changed since the last time I looked at it. Tonight we have 4 requests to hire. Any questions or discussion on these requests to hire? All right, seeing none, let's vote.
We've already put the past next question.
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you can just briefly sketch the role of the speech language pathologist position. That seems like a very important thing for our K-5s.
So it is for students who are identified with a disability in the area of speech and language, and its services will be listed in their IE, individual education plan. They provide anything for articulation, helping kids produce sounds or blends, to understanding language and being able to express language. So a variety of tasks that see kids individually and in small groups. We also see kids with classroom setting, really depending on the services and what the IEP decides and how those services are best delivered.
Thank you.
And if I'm remembering correctly, I feel like a couple of years ago, we had a really hard time hiring speech and language pathologists. So hiring 2, is that what it is? Before the school year's even over.
Yep.
Great job.
And these are for next year, and they're
Yes.
based on retirements.
Yeah, one retirement and
Oh.
then one resignation. They're moving as families.
Oh.
Can I ask a question too? Now that we're starting. Are students that receive speech and language, do they have IEP, all of them have IEPs? So kids without IEPs do not receive speech and language?
They do not.
Thank you.
Motion passes unanimously. There's no more questions. We can move on to our action agenda. We have one item tonight to approve the adoption of the Parent Square Communication Tool.
So moving.
Second.
All right, motion made, second by Michelle, thank you. So we discussed this at the last meeting. I want to say, Katie's not here, but thanks very much to the folks, Katie and whoever else has worked on writing this tool. Any questions or discussion on the adoption of the Parent Square Communication Tool?
So I went through the company's demos and videos Saturday, I think. It looks very impressive. I think this is really going to help our outreach channels and the whole community. It's like for as a parent table. But what they said about having so many ways the information comes in and making sure it's consistent through one tool that's is really struck on. Yeah.
Just to clarify, is this $19,425.50 per year?
Yes.
Any additional questions or discussion on the Parent Square tool?
Obviously, two of the highlights for me, and I also watched those but a while ago. I really was impressed, but I truly value the language piece, the translation, and also that community members that do not have children in our schools can opt in to receive information. Yeah, that's priceless.
Can I just ask a little bit, I forgot the timing for implementation of this. What are we shooting for?
I would say leading into next school year.
Okay, so not before summer school sign up when we're all like Taylor Swift concert. Perfect.
All right. Any additional questions or discussion? All right, let's vote.
Over there.
And motion passes unanimously. To the discussion agenda. First up, we have a review of the early college credit program requests for fall of 2025.
All right, so this is a standard item that comes before the board, a handful of times throughout the course of the school year. Included in the background, you can see the number of requests by the number of different students for both this summer and for this coming fall. As a reminder, students have the ability to request really as many courses as they want. They're only approved for 1 or 2 courses, so a lot of times we'll request multiple courses. And then the other piece that goes along with it is if we offer a comparable course to the courses that are requested, ultimately that is not something they're able to take unless there's a special circumstance that allow an exemption for that. Again, when you look at these numbers, they've been pretty consistent. I think there's only one difference between what last fall's request and next fall's request are as far as the number of courses. There's actually the same number of students. So, again, just informational purposes at this point in time, unless there are any questions, either Mr. Drake or myself.
Questions for Brian or Mr. Drake? All right, thank you. Next up, we have a review of the elementary school sections for the 2025-2026 school year.
Yep. So last board meeting, we shared with you the preliminary numbers for elementary sections for next year. And we shared that the numbers, particularly at Downsville Elementary School, were significantly lower than what we've seen. We've been working as a department or as an administration and various options. Today we had a meeting with the Downsville staff to talk about questions and to get their ideas for possible solutions. And what I'll say is that there's more work that needs to be done. The suggestion that we discussed with the staff, in addition to having a large staff meeting, we're going to meet with each individual staff member out there, because what we're finding is that even though this issue leading into next year is specific to kindergarten, when we start projecting forward what that could mean, it becomes a bigger issue that also impacts staffing. It also could impact enrollment in other grade levels. So what really turned into what appeared to be a relatively in one school has turned into an issue that has a lot of other factors that come into play. For instance, we do have several vacancies for next year based on retirements, and we're going to be talking about our staffing. But our current staff members also need to consider their futures and their interest in vacancies. And with such a small school, it wouldn't take many teachers wanting to move to a different building to have a huge impact on what we're able to staff at Downsville for next year. So I guess it's premature to go into too many details on it, other than the fact that I think a lot more discussion and a lot more study is going to be required to determine what's going to happen at Downsville even beginning next year. I don't know, Rachel and Michelle had the opportunity to represent the board at the meeting today as observers. I don't know if either of you had any comments that you wanted to make based on what you heard. So,
as Joe started to mention a little bit about it, we have more questions than answers really, and we were there to listen. So the team, the admin team that was there did a great job facilitating the discussion and really allowing teachers to talk to us about what their thoughts and feelings were, and the next steps are really driven by them. So I think we're still have a lot of investigating to do.
Yeah, I would say I think that there was clearly a lot of tension around, not wanting to see, this community school go. But I think everyone in the room needs to think about what needs to come next and how it's going to play out.
And At the last board discussion, when we shared these numbers with you, the board suggested that we reach out to all the 4-year-old families in the district who will be having kids go to kindergarten next year, thinking that perhaps some people in our district would maybe want to take advantage of the smaller class sizes. So Brian did a really nice job. We put a letter together, and that went out to all 4K families. And we created an expedited in-district transfer process that would allow those families who would perhaps want to take advantage of the low class sizes to make a request to have their child go to Downsville Elementary instead of one of the schools in town. And what we actually found from that, instead of getting some people requesting to go to Downsville, we actually received some requests from families that did not want their children in such a small section of class size, where they actually asked to have their children go in town. So we were already dealing with a very small potential kindergarten class, and now it's gotten even smaller if we honor those requests. Generally, we try to honor parent requests when possible, when the class sizes and the resources that we have available can allow us to honor those requests. So the other thing we did is Mrs. Bird, or Mrs. Lee, sorry Stacy, Miss Lee put together a letter for all Downsville families, and she did a really nice job with that because we wanted to make sure Downsville families were aware of this issue. And she also encouraged Downsville families to help spread the word that, if you have kids, that aren't registered yet, please get them registered because we're in the planning phase. And it was great, a great informational piece, but it did not change anything with the interest that we have in the kindergarten class in terms of that sectioning. And it just really does get difficult because you start projecting forward what that would mean, and if you're a first grade teacher and there's no kindergarten class next year, and we have a couple first grade openings right now in one of our schools that has stable enrollment, those teachers need to think about their future, and they want to be able to control their future. They don't want to, some of them might not want to wait till next year, because even though every year we have some retirements, every year we have some teachers that might move back to where they came from or wherever, it's really unknown which buildings or which grade levels those vacancies are going to be in. And when you're talking about a single section school that only has kindergarten through 5th grade, if all of a sudden you're trying to replace 3 or 4 of those teachers, or maybe even more, that gets difficult. The other piece is that, so then if you do have to replace those teachers, how are your recruiting efforts going to play out when you have a school that, as people are interviewing for positions, they know there's not a kindergarten, and that they're, as we're trying to interview them, they're also interviewing us as an employer, and whether or not they're going to have a long-term future. So what started as one small thing, we're seeing the potential to be very large, and to be very upfront with everybody, the board, the community, everyone. We need to look at whether having a school open at Downsville next year is viable. It requires, what it takes to run a school and how important staffing is. And we also don't want to take a teacher who is requesting a different position in the district, who's done a terrific job for us. We don't want to tell those teachers, no, you need to stay where you're at, because then we might lose them to a whole different district. So, we're going to have individual meetings with each staff member to kind of find out, what their questions are and what their intentions are. But from there, I think we're going to have to make a recommendation to the board about, what we're going to do. We want to be upfront with everything. We want to have good communication. But we are getting down, close to the end of the school year, and decisions are going to have to be made. The next item on the agenda, we're going to talk about the staffing plan. Well, that's going to be greatly impacted. The good news I would say right now is, based on the retirements we have and based on the vacancies we have, we feel very comfortable that we can guarantee everybody at Downsville Elementary continued employment for 2025, 2026, whether or not Downsville stays open. I don't know if we can make that same guarantee in 26, 27, and beyond. A lot of that will have to do with what happens with future enrollments. Do board members have any questions or any suggestions that you'd like to talk about?
I'm just looking at this, and there's been, or as you say, once that letter went out, there was, I can see where we put all the notes, all the different transfers that have been made, and who's going where, and, you know, whatever. So to me, that's going to impact our in-town schools, could, you know, some of them. So I'm just kind of concerned about that as well, you know, overcrowding or maybe another section where, you know.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's one of the things we have been studying, because if we do not have room in town, that definitely impacts what possibilities could be considered. I will say that when we look at the other schools and we look at the sections that we have, I think we would have to probably add 2 sections out of those 6th grade levels. I think the other 4 we could absorb within the current staffing and current section that we have. And we do have space for at least 2 sections. So from that aspect, we can make it work. It does get a little bit tricky, I think, with siblings and things like that. We want to be real sensitive to. It would not be the easiest thing to do, but I'm certain that we could do a good job making it work.
Emily?
Yeah, I just had a question. So you mentioned staffing would be covered with retirements or things. Was that with everybody, like administration, the lunch lady, like everybody, did that cover that?
Yes, our intention for next year would be to guarantee employment to every single Downsville staff member. I will say that almost all of the positions would fill a vacancy that we currently have. I also think there are a few areas that we would come forward to the board with some recommendations on programming needs that have been identified that we would be able to address with some additional staffing. So I think our overall staffing for next year would be down. We wouldn't necessarily be creating new positions, but I think how we share some of those would allow us to maybe add some additional services that currently are not in our staffing plan.
I do want to add that it is a very difficult situation to be trying to remove emotion from governance, especially if you've ever set foot in Downsville School or had a relationship with that school building at all. You walk in and it feels like family, you feel like home, and that's just the environment that it is. I get just thinking about it. So, looking at it, looking at numbers and pencil, paper, and all of that, yes, it's important, and we all recognize that. But I just want to make sure that it's said on record that that whole other emotional aspect of how loved that school is and how that staff is such a family in the community as well, that is recognized. It's not being unrecognized. It's not being left unrecognized. This is a difficult situation for everyone.
And to follow up on Michelle's comments, I do want to let you know that I shared with the staff that as we look at solutions for Downsville, the board has not directed us as administrators to look at cuts, and this has not been financially motivated. Certainly, budgets are tight. We did make, significant cuts to our budget for this year. More than likely, additional cuts are going to be needed. There is a financial benefit for closing an elementary school, but I also wanted the staff to know that is not the driving force. We want to do what's best for our kids, for our staff, for our families, and that's really the driving force behind what we're trying to do.
I think as you study this situation, there could be some other things that we can think outside the box too. And I don't want to say too much because I don't want to get people thinking, oh my gosh, the board's going to do this. But there's ways of maybe utilizing down to a different way. We make it a 4K cycle or, something like that. And then that's just
Yeah, and we might be getting the cart before the horse a little bit. I can tell you right now, I would not recommend that we go and put Downsville Elementary building up for sale, June 1st. I think, in the event that we did not have classes there next year, I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. A lot of study and discussion and input should be taken to determine what is best for that site, whether it be continuing to be part of the school system and maybe used for something different. Maybe it's continuing to, look at demographic trends and to see. I mean, right now it's not looking like, rural areas are growing, but it would only take, one big business to come in and, sell the town. And that could have an impact, or a new housing development or something. I'm not aware of any of those things, but I do think we would want to take our time and be cautious before making any decisions like that.
And the broader question of how we expect the population and demographics to change in the area over time, we have additional, and this year's enrollment data based on the current population and expectations, but there's still a lot of developments being built up in the city of Menomonie. And is there any updated projections of that since we talked about a year ago about those?
In terms of how much new enrollment might come?
Yeah, there's so many families expected in the area. Kind of these big, there's kind of these large regional predictions sometimes.
No, I don't have anything like that to share tonight. That's exactly what we should look at before making decisions about what to do with the building. I don't know that should have a large impact on what we decide with staffing or programming yet, for now, for next year. But I definitely think that the physical facility, we'd be wise to look at that.
And there's kind of, two different horizons of planning we're trying to think through. One is now in the summer, right? And the other is something more like in that kind of vague 3 to 6 year timeline, what does it look like across the entire district as well? And I think that combining those two, there's one.
I think when we talk about that kind of 3 to 6 year timeline, it's important to keep in mind too that, while of course if the Downsville school is vacant for a year and then there, something like a 4K site or the district comes up with another use for it, it seems to me that we'd be better off not leaving it vacant for a year, right? Like it's possible to be using a year to do some of that brainstorming, to do some of that kind of planning around what could happen to the site while it's still being used, at least in the 1st through 5th grade, right? So I do want to make sure that we're still kind of keeping on the table that depending on what happens with some of the conversations that happen in the next couple of weeks with existing staff, having the 1st through 5th grade classes there next year are not off the table yet.
Yeah, my preference would be to keep Downsville open next year with grades 1st through 5th. But I also, and I shared that with the staff today, but I also share with the staff that I don't think it's in our best interest to try to restaff the entire building. And when I say entire building, I don't mean 100%, but if we're staffing 50% or more, that's not a good sign. And, there's been some long-time people at Downsville too. We have a retirement in the front office, and there's a lot to consider here. But I think Rachel's right. I think what we would like to do is keep it open. I know that's what we would like to do, but I'm just not sure how feasible that's going to be, and we'll know a lot more in 2 weeks next time we meet.
I think the approach of talking carefully with the staff and families who are most involved is the right approach. Because our goal is to serve people, right? And the people being the family, the parents, the kids, and the staff. And then having it led to those discussions is, I think, the right approach. My very weak preference at this point is to think about that kind of gradual soft landing into some goal, perhaps. But we don't know until
Is it appropriate to start thinking about some kind of a parent or community at a place where the Downsville families can ask questions?
I think so. I think what we need to do first, though, is really have these meetings with our staff.
Right.
Because if we can't staff the building, appropriately with, veteran, not all veteran teachers, but experienced, well qualified was the term I was looking for. If we don't feel we're able to staff the building with a well-qualified staff to serve our kids and families, to me, that's the first thing that we need to figure out. And frankly, that's the most timely thing, because our people need to make decisions about what they want to do next year for employment, and then everyone's doing that right now. So I think that's the real driving force first, and then I think as soon as we get to that point, then I think, yes, we need to get our families in and have an opportunity for questions, input, feedback, all that.
I would like to say I think that's really commendable that you are going to be enriching your staff member. I think that's very important.
Well, thank you, and I've got to give Tony a lot of credit for that, and the staff. We had a great discussion today. It was a collaborative effort. Sam was there, and like I said, Rachel and Michelle as well.
Additional questions or discussion? That was all about Downsville, but are there also questions about the other elementary school sections for the 25-26 school year?
I guess I have one more question. Thinking about that timeline you just mentioned,
Okay.
our next board meeting is what, 24th, is that right?
Correct.
So that's immediately after spring break. I'm guessing a lot of people will be not thinking about some of these issues, hopefully, in that meeting. I wonder what sort of information do you think we'll have in 2 weeks?
That's a really good question, Abe. We're going to do everything we can to try to have the individual meetings, as many of them as possible this week. And again, I would prefer to take, 6 weeks to do this, but I just don't think we have that time when we talk about staff members, both ours and potential candidates, needing to make decisions in the spring. So I would say in 2 weeks, we'll put a report together, which we also plan to share with the staff. Here's kind of what we've gleaned from the individual meetings. There may be a real clear direction after those meetings. We might not know more than we know now. But we're also going to try to lay out a process for the staff. There was a lot of discussion about that. So if a staff member decides to stay for one more year or whatever it is, how would that impact their employment in the district the following year? And we're going to try to work through that stuff. I would say we would share that with the board as well. I do not expect a recommendation, certainly not action, that the board would take in 2 weeks.
We'll have some information about the feedback of some of the staff, hopefully most of the staff, in terms of how they're feeling in terms of their career and their interest in the district.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
I have some thoughts about the class sizes that are pushing over 70. I think the kindergarten one worries me a bit. I could see third grade surviving with 24-ish, 25-ish, but like kindergarten is rough.
I agree, and I think what you're referring to River Heights Kindergarten.
Yes, and then Oakland is third grade.
So if we look at River Heights Kindergarten 73, yeah, and Oak Lawn, we have those in orange because those are two that we track very carefully. And that also relates back, to the Downsville discussion. There is opportunity there, to add another section. Whether or not, no matter what happens to Downsville, I think we need to look at that kindergarten section especially. But you see there's room there to add some students and add a fourth section. And that would really impact not just one class, but impact 4, actually 5 if you include the Downsville kindergarten. We plan to have a recommendation for the board coming up here. I think we talked about that last time, that we like to have our staffing done by the end of the previous school year if possible. But we're still monitoring in-district transfer requests. Tony, can you speak to that just a little bit about the in-district transfer requests and when we'll know a little bit more before we finalize some of these sections?
I would say in April, beginning of April, I think is the date for principals to kind of look at that
But I would anticipate, Dominique, that more than likely there'll be a fourth section recommended for kindergarten River Heights. I think the Oakland third grade is one we're going to really have to watch carefully to see what happens with the in-district requests.
When, in the notes section, when it says an open enrollment in, like it says open enrollment in from Altoona, that would mean someone coming to Menomonie from
Yes.
Altoona, right? Okay.
Yes.
There's an active application out there.
Got it, good. Just wanted to make sure I was reading that correctly. Any additional questions or discussion on elementary school sections? Next up, we have our staffing plan, 2025-26.
So you can see in the staffing plan that really, well, it's almost identical to what we have for this current school year. I do expect, some continued changes over the next few weeks as we, again, monitor this enrollment situation. But I want to thank Brian and the directors for their work in putting this together. I will say that one area of need that's listed at the bottom of the plan is some additional contract time to provide oversight in our high school dual enrollment programming. It's only 10 hours, but we felt it was important to share that with the board, that we feel that that's something that's going to be. But do any of the other directors have any comments that you want to share about the staffing plan?
Can I ask a question about that contract time? Is that work currently, when you say contract time, is that work currently being done by someone who's working on a part-time basis? Or, okay, so or it's part of somebody's larger job?
Yep, at the high school, we have identified staff members that receive some extended contract hours during the summer as part of that work. So some of it is done during the school year. Some of it, there are responsibilities in the summer, and we're simply looking at adding an additional 10 hours distributed across those different extended contracts for summer work time. As applications come in, need to be reviewed, and then there's ongoing communication back and forth between CTC and UW-STEL, our dual enrollment partners, and act as a facilitator for that communication.
So it's 10 hours per,
So it's an additional 10 hours on top of what they already currently have. And it would, just right now the plan is to distribute that between two different individuals.
So they would each get 5 hours in the summer.
Yeah.
oh, like per year?
Yes.
10 hours?
Yes, it's not much.
per
Not
week.
like, that's okay.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood it.
Yeah, I
No, not per day.
If you know someone who can find 10 extra hours a day, I wasn't sure that was a pay period or not, but it's total.
I do want to point out, though, that, like I said, our enrollment is pretty stable. The staffing plan is almost identical. But when we put a staffing plan to the board, this is the max staffing that we would go to without additional approval. Sometimes, especially at the beginning of the school year, we may have some students that move in or are identified for needing special services. That's when we would come to you during the school year after the staffing plan has been approved and ask for an addendum or amendment to the staffing plan. That's not uncommon. Also, it wouldn't be uncommon that as we went through the sectioning, we were able to identify some areas where maybe not as much staffing was needed as what was brought forward. Or in the case, like we talked about with River Heights, with the larger kindergarten section, we may need to bring that forward and say, we'd like your permission to hire an extra kindergarten teacher. But our base staffing plan that we are working, we need a base plan so that we can move forward with hiring and filling positions. That's what this is.
So right now, it's basically the same right now, other than 10 additional hours for Riverside High School dual enrollment. Right?
Yes.
So it's just, so in other words, we could probably get information later to vote on if we wanted to add something.
Yeah, we'll still bring our plan, the base plan forward for approval.
Okay.
But then, yeah, if anything in addition, we'll ask for additional approval.
I was kind of surprised to not see like more requests, because we added, I think, quite a few last year. And I was curious if that is impacted by like the fact that by our budget, like if they're not included because like admin is doing the work of like paring down like what we can do, if that makes sense, or if like, I don't know how to figure that, but are there requests that like people wanted, but they're not here because of like budget issues, or like we're like, this is it?
You know, we brought forward the high school course request to the board for approval. I know the board reviewed that a month ago and approved it at the last meeting. You know, there were a few courses in there that were not running based on lower enrollment. I'm trying to think if there's other things. Sam or Brian?
Eric's document, the request, those provided to staff.
Oh, the tool?
Yeah, the budgeting tool.
Oh yeah, we are still reviewing the budgeting tool. In fact, the lead team, the deadline was Friday, I think.
The deadline was Friday, yes.
And the lead team will be reviewing that tomorrow. So it is possible that some additional staffing could be requested based on that feedback. But we also do pare down. I mean, we look at, you know, what are the most reasonable and equitable way to expend resources and bring recommendations forward.
Were you kind of asking if there were requests that originated at like the building level that were sort of, you know, not turned down, but sort of decided not to bring up to the point? Or if it was just like everybody felt like the status quo was what we needed? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. I'm so sorry, I can't get my question clear. It's clear that I can't get it out.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that there aren't more requests for staffing, because there are more requests and the board can't always approve them all. So I was just curious if like admin was like just really conscious of that fact, and like when you know that you can't approve everything, you just put forward exactly what you need. Like, so I was just curious if there were needs that were not met.
You know, I wouldn't really say so. There might be a specific example somewhere that I'm not thinking right now, but I think perhaps it's because we've expanded staffing so much with our intervention programming, especially. Also, special education staffing has been increased each of the last.
This is my first year that I haven't requested new staffing, but I would think overall, my feeling is we're all aware that the referendum didn't pass. And I think we're all more aware of when we want a budget that look at that a little more critical than maybe we have in the past. We know the need of that a little bit more. But definitely, I think Joe knows I'm not shy about asking for staff when I feel like I need it. So, but I mean, I have requested staff in the past and received it. So now I'm feeling, I can say, okay, I'm optimistic.
Well, and it goes back to enrollment. You know, our enrollment's not increasing, so you know the programming and services that we have would probably increase in most cases unless we had a new program that was being approved. Also, we're providing programming in a lot of ways that don't necessarily have to do with our staff. Whether we're talking about the dual credit academy stuff, the CBTC, or classes being taken at UW Stout, or virtually, you know, that doesn't require staffing necessarily. So that's it. But the other thing too is, again, talking about enrollment. You know, we've followed the guidelines that the board set for class sizes. I mean, if you ask any teacher, would you rather have a smaller class size? I can't hardly think of a teacher that wouldn't say yes. But when we have guidelines, you know, that's kind of been how we have structured our staffing requests.
So the message is, I'm hearing correctly that admin team of principals are feeling empowered to request what they feel they need.
I think so.
Is that what you're trying to get to? Just saying.
She was trying.
Doing my best.
Along those lines, I guess this is a little bit tangential, but it is on topic, is, in the last year, we've seen a lot of work, for the Act 20 reading programs, and my indirect impression from your various reports and discussions is that that was a lot of work, especially in this first year, and that a lot of that's also a lot of PE time. I was kind of curious if you feel, because this is about workload, right, versus number of staff, especially the K-5, if you feel that giant glob of work is going to re-stabilize in the coming year, or if it feels like that there's like a heightened level of investment that has to be continued that year, which then impacts workload of the staff members.
So,
You go ahead, you go first.
I was going to say, so, it will really take us a couple of rounds of going through that work to really answer that question. Again, similar to what Joe had said, as we ask the question right out of the gate, is this a lot of work and is it manageable? Yes, it's a lot of work. Is it manageable? Yes and no at that point in time. But what I will say is we did see how quickly navigating through that first round of screening and personal reading plans, okay, this does appear to be manageable as we learn our process. It's a new process. We'll do another round of screening this spring and then again in the fall. And I think the real answer to that question will come forward when we see how many students will be working their way through that process. And really, it will probably be next year's staffing plan where, this time next year we will know, yes, this is manageable, no, it's not manageable, or, the pieces that are or aren't manageable, where do they lie? Do they lie at the instructional level? Do they lie at the intervention level? Or do they lie at the record keeping level, I guess I will call it?
Yeah, I remember a discussion that happened at the education convention about, the number of hours necessity was adding to each teacher's workload in terms of, doing the reading plans. And in some classes, it was, a huge percentage of their students who needed individual plans, files, and everything, and maintain them. And then, that becomes work hours, and that becomes workload, and that becomes something where maybe that might eventually down the line impact the staffing plan. So I think, it makes sense that we kind of see it, if there is an effect, see an effect more next year. But as we all know, there's increasing demands on our staff, legislatively and for all sorts of reasons, and just making sure that the workload expectations are fair and we aren't, slowly wearing people down.
Yeah. And, excuse me, specific to Act 20, I think we've talked about that before. I think Brian and his team have done a great job with the process. I do think in some areas they've had no choice but to add staff. I think our processes have been top notch. The other piece is that we had so many things in place that were very applicable to the Act 20 expectations with all the intervention that we already built in, that I think some schools are in catch-up mode having to hire interventionists. We already have that. So, but you're right. It's always going to have to be something that's going to have to be studied.
Any additional questions or discussion for the staffing plan for 2025-26? Next up, we have a discussion of our 4K programming agreement.
So Brian does this every year. Appreciate his work collaborating with the 4K providers. Brian, anything you want to point out in this?
So really the only two things that are in the next, or the proposed plan for next school year that is not in our current agreement, on an annual basis, we look at a rate increase. So we've included that in the background. And then in in discussion, we decided that during the next school year, we want to take a look at our evaluation process that we use for quality evaluation and determine whether or not that's a system we want to stay with, or we might want to take a look at a different one. We started some of that conversation. It's timely that we do that. But really, those are the two main things as far as the agreements themselves are concerned for next school. So that, other than that, it's the standard agreement we've used for several years, so we'll come back and consider approving that.
And the thing we're approving is just a sort of like contract, right? And this isn't about how many students are in each site with that.
So, yeah, it's just a contract.
Any questions for Brian or discussion about the 4K programming agreements? All right. Moving on, discuss recommendations for a direct primary care provider near site clinic.
So you all know that we've made significant changes to our health insurance program in the school district the last few years. And the most significant change is when we changed our consultants to the insurance center. And one of the items when we were choosing a consultant was someone who could help set us up with a primary care subscription model type of system. And as all sorts of organizations struggle with the increasing cost of healthcare, one tool that's been successful is when organizations have a primary care option that is available for employees that, one, provides better accessibility to the organization, but two, you're able to contract for those, I don't want to call them minor care items, but those primary care items where you wouldn't necessarily need to see a specialist or go into a system. So Sam and the Insurance Center and Eric have been working together on this. They had a process. Dale Dalkey was also involved in the interviews. So I don't know if either Sam or Brian want to share a little bit about what's been learned and where we're at.
Sure. I can.
Sorry, Eric, I called you Brian.
But if Brian wants to chime in.
Yeah, Brian. Yeah, let's hear Brian talk about primary. Sorry, Eric.
Yeah, we have a timeline. We decided to do some requests for some RFPs, some requests for proposals. We had 3 entities or providers that did submit their proposals. We reviewed them. We felt that all 3 were viable options. And so we set up interviews with them on Friday, which is why you're getting this information today, because it was really through the morning or the big part of the afternoon to get through this, the interviews. They provided us with some great additional information, and we are meeting tomorrow, those of us that were part of the interview process, to kind of discuss what each entity brings, and then make a decision about which one we feel would be best for our needs and for those that are on our school district insurance plan. So our hope is to have some sort of implementation or rollout over the summer, or at least by the beginning part of next school year. So that is our plan. I don't know if Eric or Dale, if you have anything that either of you want to add.
Well, I'm not sure how much we should talk about at this time, but it was very good interviews, and I was particularly positive about 2 of the 3. And there's some pluses and minuses with each. I don't know if we're going to get into them or not.
No.
No? Okay.
I should not talk about the details.
But anyway, they were all 3, just like you said, viable. And all would save the district money.
And that's why I wanted to, could either of you kind of speak to the idea of having a primary care provider and how that is a benefit for staff and the district?
Sure.
I can start, you can jump in.
Sure.
So the goal behind it would be that, as Dr. Sadowski mentioned, that it would be a per member per month subscription model. So we would pay per member of our health insurance plan per month, and the overall cost monthly or annually would actually be less than if the care that people that are on our plan would utilize at a bigger system. It would be a low cost, like a co-pay low cost model. So instead of accessing care at a bigger provider, more of a system, our employees would go to this primary care provider, and they would pay a co-pay, very small co-pay, and they would get their services. If a referral was needed, there is a way for our staff already in place to be able to use care navigation, or if the staff member felt more comfortable being referred to a larger system, that is also an option as well. So it allows our staff to be able to access care without having to pay the high cost of going to a larger establishment that would charge a lot more.
And it would be optional, is that correct? So if a staff member wanted to keep the primary care doctor that they have had, they could do that, and the cost of that would not go up per se, but this would be an option for a lower cost.
It would be a win, I think, for really both. So the staff, they have, on average, there are longer appointments, certainly cheaper for them, for things that you really do go to the doctor a lot for, assuming, a healthy person, you're sick, you go to this facility, you can get it taken care of relatively quickly. And also win for the district, because instead of going to a larger healthcare provider that's more expensive, they're going to this smaller thing that we have provided for them, and really a win on both sides.
So our health insurance program, and again, we're self-funded, so anything we can do to reduce the cost of the expenses not only helps our employees, but also helps us as a school district. And in the past, we could go a long ways past, but in the most recent past, what we've done is we have done more kind of like a point of service or HMO type of model, where we have negotiated with a large system to direct our business there. Employees still had choices beyond that, out of network, but your savings was through the in-network process. Well, this is kind of the next step. This is kind of having another immediate step prior to that directed service to a large organization. And what I really like about it, especially with how health care has changed in the Chippewa Valley, is if you are able to contract with a direct provider, your access is greatly improved as opposed to scheduling an appointment with a large system provider. So access for our employees would be great, much better. The other piece is that we're able to negotiate, I think, better with those providers for things like pre-employment physicals, or for your routine care type of stuff. I think you can get done a lot less expensive than if you go to the bigger system. And like it was mentioned, I think it's very important, it is optional, but the idea behind this is that the employee would not be charged against their deductible and things like that. It'd be more of a subscription base where the district would pay the subscription. There may be some smaller co-pay type of things depending on what services are negotiated and are provided. But I know the city of Menomonie has been using this, Dunn County I believe as well. And this is kind of the newer age of providing health care for organizations, and we're getting into it.
So I have a question. I'm not sure this can be answered in open session without some NDA issue or something. But so I'll ask the question, and if you have to defer it to later discussion, that's totally fine. Since this is about competition with a larger system, I'm curious if Mayo in particular expressed interest in this sort of approach, and whether or not they did, if it can be used as a negotiating tactic to lower other prices, because they are a large system just down in the area.
So I do think we should avoid talking about any particular group. But I also want to say the way we classified that might not have been the best way. Because it isn't necessarily large system compared to small system, there are some large systems that have this type of service that's available. And we actually have, at least one reasonably larger system that has provided a solution for us. In terms of your other question about could it be used for negotiating, that's what the insurance center does for us. And I do think in future renewals, I think if we have a book of business that's going to a primary care provider and they see that book of business, I do think that, whether you end up moving back to the previous model with a better rate, I do think there's a lot of things, I think there's benefits for that negotiation.
The challenge has always been in the insurance business, especially in the last several years, that an organization about the size of SBMA has very little clout in the market compared to these giant insurance companies and the entire nationwide insurance market, especially in our area with third providers. And so any ability to gain leverage in that discussion is where I'm going.
I agree.
On the flip side, do you anticipate there be any risk of there being increased friction in getting referrals?
That's a good question. We actually just talked about that this afternoon. And from everything that we can understand in talking with our insurance consultant, has not been an issue. But we do want to ask that question of him just to make sure, especially considering that at least one of the providers would be new to this area, wanting to make sure that referral would be seamless if those services were necessary, and also that there weren't additional charges that someone would have to incur if they had to have blood work done or have a different type of scan or something like that. So we're working on that.
Yes, I do. My question is, where will this place be? Where? I mean, is there going to be at a place where the company already is, or are they going to set up an on-site clinic in the first schools?
You guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple are, I would say, already established in the area, and there would be at least one that would need to look for a place to set up and begin providing care. But it would be a near-site clinic, not an on-site.
Okay.
So on-site would be on one of our properties. Near-site means nearby.
Okay, thank you. Very much.
Were any staff members who are part of the health and medical committee able to attend the interviews? And if not, I'm curious if you've been able to get a sense of what those folks saw as the priorities for choosing a provider.
We were not able to have anyone join us for the interviews, but we did talk about this at our last health and medical committee meeting. And when we talked about it, and Dale, please jump in too. The staff members that were part of that committee felt very good about this, really felt good about having this as an option, and especially the low cost and, as we said, the accessibility. The proposals that came back, at least 2 of them said that you are able to schedule an appointment within 24 to 48 hours, if not the same day. And that, those of you that have tried to access care recently in this area know how incredibly valuable that is. So those were our priorities, was that accessibility, and as well as offering a low-cost option for our staff.
Thank you.
The staff members at that last meeting asked the same questions that you people have asked. And like you said, they were all positive.
Great. Any additional questions or discussion on the direct primary care provider? So we would be approving this potentially in 2 weeks?
Yes, we plan to bring the recommendation to the board in 2 weeks.
Okay, great. Moving on, we will discuss defeasance of long-term debt. This is a favorite word. We've all learned it over the last couple of years.
So The board just did this not long ago, so we'll spare you we'll answer as many questions as you want.
I think our previous board members were not here for the last seasons.
Okay, well, we'll answer the questions, we'll spare you the long discussion. And I don't want to steal all Eric's thunder here, but.
We should quiz him on the
What I would like to point out is that we continue to do everything we can to lower the cost that we're spending on interest. And if you go back to 2013 with the referendum that the community passed and look at what was approved and how much has actually been spent, this defeasance would now get us to $8.6 million that we've been able to save in interest costs through a combination of refinancing and debt defeasance. So Eric, you want to just mention a few of the details about this round, please?
Yeah, so this round of defeasance would be for the, Baird identified the ones that would be for 2031 through 2033. And paying those down, again, according to Baird, would be a little over $383,000. So, again, that's, as Joe said, that this total savings since 2013 would be bumped up then to little over $8.6 million that the district has saved since the inception of the debt. And again, this round would be a little over $383,000 that would be saved as a result of the defeasance.
And the funds that would go toward making those payments are from the 139 tax levy, that's correct?
Correct. So
So that's not coming out of our 110?
That is correct. So the last levy, it would be a little over $2 million in that last October levy. Correct.
Other questions or discussion on this round of the long-term debt? So this would come back for a vote in 2 weeks.
Yes.
Does anyone have any concerns? I think it's great that we're able to, act proactively. It seems like it's been almost every year to help reduce that debt. Or totally. All right. Next up, Eric's still in the hot seat with our 2024-25 budget revisions.
So yeah, as you can see, so just to kind of go over some of the highlights here. So there was in Fund 10, there was a special project grant that in the original budget was placed in Fund 10, but actually belonged in Fund 27. So that needs to be pulled out, and then you see that Fund 10 balance would go down a little bit, but then it would basically, it would go into the Fund 27, which is where it belonged. Fund 46 is a net wash basically, so there's no real difference in that. It's just moving around funds within the Fund 46. And then Fund 73, also they're in the original budget. This came up during a WISE data finance report that objects that are expenses has to equal the total amount that's coded as revenue in sources 951 and 953, and that is reflected in that balance right there. So a few adjustments in 4 of the funds is basically what it's reporting on.
So that Fund 73 is a change in coding, not a change in actual.
Correct.
I really like this, it's so easy to follow.
I really appreciate this format, yeah. Any other questions regarding budget revisions? One more time. Thank you very much. All right, next up we have our 2025-2026 preliminary budget estimate.
So, I submitted a few things. So, first of all, I'll start with the one that's status quo. So this gives us an idea for, not only next year, but a few years in the future. all things being equal, what will happen, particularly to Fund 10, you know, with our budget here at Menomonie School District. So the status quo assumes the following. So the per pupil increase, of course, that's the 400-year, you know, codified that you know, it'll be a per pupil increase for $325 for, I think we're on year 398 of the 400-year increase in that. The per pupil categorical aid at $742, and again, you can see that that is also just status quo, what would happen if that was just left alone. And as you can see, when you look at the surplus or deficit in Fund 10, that quite rapidly in a couple of years, Fund 10, the balance in Fund 10 will go down considerably, which is either going to have to result in a referendum in a couple of years or a lot of cutting of expenses within the budget in that amount. You can see as you go to 2930, it's quite an alarming amount that would be a deficit in Fund 10.
Can you remind me really quick, Joe, back at the mid-year budget hearing, we had a discussion about what we thought the number was that the Fund 10 balance should maintain to avoid the short-term borrowing.
I think with current spending levels, it's about 11 million.
Just want to keep that in mind as I look at these numbers. So
Yeah.
it looks like we're crossing that in 28-29
Yeah.
in this projection.
Correct, yes. So as you can see, again, if nothing has changed in the budget, this is kind of the outlook of what will happen. So Governor Evers did have a State of the State address in which he proposed a few changes. So if you look at the Tony Evers plan, he proposed a per pupil increase of $108. Which would move the 325 to, I'm sorry, no. Sorry, that was the other one. So he proposed an increase in per pupil funding from 325 to 334 for the 25-26 year, and then $345 for the 26-27 year. Then he proposed a per pupil categorical aid increase of $108 from the current $742 to $850. So I made those changes. If those two changes were made, it would help our budget, of course, but it wouldn't have that much of an impact on it. One of his proposals that would have a big impact is the 60% special ed reimbursement. So when you factor that in, so the current level, it's around 30%, 32%, depending on the year. If that got bumped up to 60%, you can see the dramatic effect that would have on our Fund 10. It would stave off referendum, it would stave off huge cuts in expenses for a few years. Really, go ahead.
If you could pause that for a second.
Sure.
You know, and if you think back, I had shared a Facebook post about a month ago detailing how we are one of the higher districts in the state in terms of having to transfer Fund 10 general ed dollars to supplement Fund 27, the mandated special services. And we do have a fairly high demographic in terms of students who receive special services, students with disabilities. And because of that and the lack of funding for special education, we are having to take general ed dollars and transfer. So, well, the special ed funding change that the governor is proposing would have an impact on all schools. It would have a disproportionate impact on a school like ours, where you're talking about almost $5 million that we're transferring from Fund 10 to cover those special education costs that are not funded well enough. So that is a really important one.
And when you say a disproportionate impact, a disproportionately positive impact.
Yes.
It would have on
Yes.
Yeah.
Eric, can you, just to be sure I'm seeing the right numbers, can
Sure.
you talk through that really quickly one more time, but also tell me where in the projection to find, so I see the per pupil increase 325, 334, 345. I see the per pupil categorical aid going 742, 850, 850. Where in that
with the special ed reimbursement, like what line do I really see that on most directly?
It would really affect the Fund 10 expenditures.
Expenditures, okay, so
Yes.
that expenditure is going down.
Correct.
Which has been having this significant impact on the surplus or deficit and follow line.
Correct.
Okay, got it, thanks.
Does everybody catch that? So the special ed doesn't show up as a direct line in here. That's 30% or 60%, but since the unreimbursed portion is coming out of Fund 10, it's showing up in Fund 10 expenditures line.
Yeah, but it only goes down for 1 year.
Well, it continues to increase every year because it's possible.
Right, so like, what does that mean? In 2 years, it's back to where it started.
Well, that's because you're talking about the Fund 10 expenditures, which would include salary increases and increases in operation costs, utilities, everything. That's not just the special education expenses.
Okay, so
That's the whole Fund 10.
Yeah, the model built in I put in like inflation, 3%, or certain other things might go up 7%. So it's making those projections in the model, not just this, that's not just the special ed expenses.
So for instance, Fund 10 expenditures in the Evers budget for 2025, 2026, it's 45.2, 45.3 million. Where if you look at the status quo, it's 47.3. So that's a $2 million difference by itself. And I'd say that's probably a little conservative even.
Correct, yeah.
And that would match what currently their grade is somewhere around 30. And it's about $5 million for moving out, so that makes sense about being up to 2.5.
Yeah, yep.
If you compare those two preliminary budget and look at that Fund 10 expenditure line item,
Right.
you can see that the Evers budget proposals, those are consistently lower, even though they go up every year.
If I can make maybe somewhat of a root version request, for those of you going to Madison tomorrow, is it, well, they're leaving tomorrow night.
Oh,
I wonder if it'd be helpful for you to have a version of this that has that as a sub-item on a line to show to people when you're talking with them about what this means for us. Like, because they don't enter that line and what that difference is, we have to go back and forth. I wonder, if I were having, I'm not going to be there, but if I were having those conversations, that's something I'd want to point to and say, look at this.
Is that something that you should whip up
Sure.
in the next day?
Yeah, I can do that.
That's part of
Yeah,
it.
that's
You're part of asking
Asking you
our
to-
business director
Right.
to make a new look at. That's a good idea, though.
It has probably a small chance of passing this plan with the 60% special ed reimbursement, has a small chance of passing as is. However, I have been keeping up with this issue, and there is some appetite in the legislature to support not necessarily 60%, but something less than that. And even if it were less than that, although it wouldn't that be as a dramatic of improvement, it would certainly have a great effect on our finances, even with less than 60%. And there is apparently some appetite for that. So, one caveat with this, although this is with this reimbursement, it would be very much good news. The one drawback of it, and it's really not much of a drawback, would be that because of the decrease in expenses, that would decrease our shared expenses, which would in turn decrease our state equalized revenue, which means that the levy, local levy would be slightly raised. So the mill rate and the local levy would be slightly, because of our state aid would go down slightly for that reason.
You'd probably still be one of the lowest in the region, if not the western half of the state.
That is correct.
And then there was a third document, so this preliminary budget estimate is this sort of like the background?
Yeah, so this is just summarizes, just for next year, it would summarize kind of the two different scenarios. And again, it would just be for the next year, it's not taken into 5 years.
And this gives a kind of projection here, what's the percent salary increase, what the percent health insurance increase.
Correct.
Projected.
Yeah, some of the assumptions there that, about increases in those amounts, yep.
This includes the current policy of having $0 come in for capital, for fund 46 countries. So it's zero, so these, the numbers in red, right? That is, there's no fund 46 transfers, it's set to 0.
Correct.
So I think it's important, a few things, is that these are all based on assumptions. You know, if you go to the Barrett projections and look, you know, the biggest thing is enrollment. And you can see that those are all projections on enrollment. Also, it's projecting out what anticipated cost of living increases would be. I will say that this is what I would consider to be the most accurate forecast I've seen in my time in Menomonie. I think Eric's done a great job with this, of really trying to dial it in. A lot of times, you know, we look more than a couple of years and it's like, oh, that doesn't even seem possible. I do think this is what is accurate as right now, but it is very, very likely to change. Well, it will change because there's so many projections built in. Even for next year, we're not going to know our per pupil count until the third Friday in September. Okay, so this is a very rough estimate. You can see that. What is the deficit for next year, Eric, that's being projected?
It was about 377.
Okay. So, you know, we are in a deficit situation with status quo. Hopefully there'll be some relief from the state. Hopefully it doesn't get worse. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with the state budget. And until we know those things, this is the best guess that we can give.
There'll be lots of negotiating, I'm sure, and there'll be listening sessions too, that people can probably attend. I agree with you.
If anyone can get it, I think it's Michelle.
To that end, are there particular questions that you guys need to answer before you head to Madison? Do you feel empowered?
So I gave you for Sunday, I think we did the graduate.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for all your work on this. Thanks for the.
Thank all three of you. I think that's really important to put this out there, which, and you know, really accomplished. And then, was it you that sent the article?
That's the next agenda.
Okay. Never mind.
All right, any final questions for Eric on the preliminary budget estimate? Again, thank you. All right, on to legislative advocacy. This is the note that Steve was talking about, message from the, what is AEF stand for? Association for Equity and Funding regarding the upcoming budget.
Sure. You know, like I just mentioned, this is the whole preliminary budget is based on assumptions. And you can see that AEF is really working hard to try to increase the low revenue ceiling. They were very successful in the last round. That would also be a major impact on Menomonie, very major positive impact, because we receive less revenue per student than many school districts in the state. And AEF doesn't think that's fair, neither do I, that you know, just because your student goes to Menomonie, the school's not able to capture as much revenue, whether it be through state aid, tax levy, you know, that's a problem. So I am very pleased to see that AEF is continuing their discussions, that there seems to be some support for potentially doing that, both in the governor's budget, but then also in discussions beyond that. But I also am concerned that word out of Madison is that because of some of the legal challenges, particularly having to do with how the veto pen was used, it is very possible that we will not have a state budget on time, which could make it very difficult for organizations like school districts to figure out what's going on. The good news is that we have a very established process here for setting our budget. I also, we've talked a lot about how important it is to have a fund balance. And basically the directive the board has given us is to set the budget that we think is needed, and that we do have fund balance that can be relied upon. But there's going to be a lot of impacts based on the discussions at the state level. And I think it's really important, as this letter talks about, that we talk about increase the special ed, we increase the low revenue ceiling, and that we have to continue funding for our schools.
Any questions or discussion, either about this letter or about legislative ethics more broadly?
A couple of things. One, speaking of a budget not being before July 1st, and then our fund balance, we're not putting anything in there, so it's kind of complete right this place. So that's another thing to be concerned about. And then if we're talking about legislative advocacy, and we have three very competent people going Wednesday. One thing I think, and of course this is not really statewide, but should the idea that the Department of Education would be going away, I think is huge, and I think that it's really up to us. I know the Wisconsin Public Education Network posted an email out there that talked about how the legislation has numbers to talk about what we have in the Department of Education's scale.
I plan to address that, the Department of Education, the DEI initiatives, as well as Act 20, because they all are intertwined. Act 20 does the distance for EL and all the students, as well as, in my opinion, the legislative are moving up to their end of the bargain with keeping the $49 million hostage, as opposed to releasing it. But we're going to do all these things, and now they have the incentive funds to support it. And I'm saying this from the school district level, but also at the higher education level, we've done all of these things, but there's millions, but we're still.
Now they're saying that money's going to go back into the general fund. That's huge, so that's the most important thing.
Another thing, I shared this with Joe back during the convention, actually. There's a slide which WASB had on their legislative update session at the convention. And I hope they have the slides fully on the WASB website, but I actually haven't checked. I have a screenshot of them. And it shows, including the referendum dollars, the revenue per pupil this current year for districts across the state. And it ranges from under 11.5 per student to over 16,000 per student. And then how many districts are in each category. In that chart, there are 16 districts in the very lowest category, and we are one of those. So I think that's also something that when you're in Madison to discuss is, every district is different and has its own needs, but I'm not comfortable with the fact that Menomonie, the state revenue formula is keeping Menomonie in the very tied for last, essentially, in revenue. That doesn't seem right.
That's on my agenda for the meeting, which is why I get that back.
That's fine, Michelle.
Also, I don't know if you noticed that
I've heard.
the education network that also had this. They showed the ticker tape thing, like a receipt coming down from the rotunda, all the referendums. It's huge. It's one thing, all the referendums in the last couple of years, which is very ridiculous, very responsible.
Any final comments or questions regarding legislative advocacy? Yes, thanks, everyone's going to Madison this week. Items related to next meeting dates, board committees, and reports. March 11th, there is tomorrow, and there is a strategic planning steering committee meeting at 6 o'clock at the AMC. As mentioned, March 12th is the Waterloo Day at the Capitol. March 12th, there will also be the school board candidate forum at 7 p.m. at the high school. March 17th through 21st is spring break. There's no school. We're coming right back after that and having our special board meeting on March 24th at Knapp Elementary School with a tour at 5 p.m. We mentioned this last time, there's a joint PAC board meeting of CISA 11 in Turtle Lake on April 3rd. The QIC meets April 7th. We'll have our regular board meeting April 14th at Downsville. No school on April 18th and 21st. April 22nd is National Bus Driver Appreciation Day. Is that later this year? Anyway, I assume board members will gather at the bus garage for that.
Sounds good.
Okay. In the past, we have brought treats and visited after the morning bus routes come back in. But that's almost a month away, over a month away. WASB new school board member gathering April 24th, and then April 28th is the special school board meeting, which will be back at the ASC having completed our tour of schools. Any questions about, any questions about upcoming meeting dates for committees and boards?
Thanks, Jenny, for organizing that.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, entertain a motion